Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Whatever anyone's views about the history or the politics of the Middle East, no one can be in any doubt that since October the 7th, we have all witnessed a humanitarian tragedy. The attacks of the terrorist group Hamas, including the murder of young people attending a music festival and the taking of hostages, was bound to set in train a series of violence that Hamas themselves must have fully understood, including a full response by the Israeli government. In completely associating myself with the comments of my right honourable friend on the government's motion, particularly the need to have an immediate humanitarian pause but a permanent, sustainable ceasefire, including the release of hostages, I wanted to take up a point that was made by the right honourable member for Ross Guy and Lochaber, who is no longer in his place, about the role that Britain can have in the more substantive issue around the conflict. As has been pointed out in this debate, we are not participants in the conflict, therefore we cannot have a direct effect on whether arms are laid down or not, but we can have an influence in the process that comes later. Sooner or later, this will have to return to a political process, and Britain should be now setting down the rules by which we want to see peace, not at the moment, to see peace put in place. And I think it's highly important that we understand what we actually mean when the term peace is being used in this context. And I know the honourable member for Oxford West, who I had the privilege to be at the Manama Dialogue with, feels very strongly about this too. And we have to make clear that on both sides, and constantly applied to both sides, the concept of peace is not just the absence of war or conflict, but the freedom from the fear of conflict or oppression or terror. And peace requires mutual respect, freedom from persecution, and living without fear of destitution. It comes with self-determination and liberation from arbitrary justice. It needs hope and dignity and enforceable rights. And only when all the people of the region have access to all of these could we talk about having achieved a peaceful solution to the conflict. Now, I think that we need to look at that political process with two addendum. The first is that when we move to a two-state solution, and we must move to a two-state solution, because the people who don't want a two-state solution are Iran, which doesn't want Israel to exist, and apparently Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't want a Palestinian state to exist, but we must recognise the will of the international community that there must be a two-state solution in the end. But for a political process to be able to exist, we need to deal with the wider security issues. There needs to be a guarantee of the security of Israel from the sort of attacks it has seen. And it's very clear that the Israeli construct of security has failed. Otherwise, the Hamas incursions would not have taken place. It's also very clear that there has to be a proper guarantee of security for any emerging Palestinian state. These quite self-evidently cannot be done by the states on their own. And just as we looked for international guarantees of security for Europe after World War II, so we will need to have international agreement around any security architecture within which a political solution can be found to the Israel-Palestinian issue. And the other thing I would say is this, that we need also, as a country, it's something that I'm sure this House can unite around, we've got to make sure that it's a wider concern about the improved prosperity, hope and opportunity of all young people in the region. Now, it's been my privilege to lead the UK's Abraham Accords group over the past 2 years, and I welcome support we've had across the House. But we have got to find mechanisms of improving the economic well-being, particularly of young people on the Arab street. Otherwise, there will be no lasting basis for a political solution. People who have got nothing to lose will gamble with it. People who have got something to lose will be much more circumspect. That has been the lesson from how peace has been brought to disputes around the world. And I believe that the the importance of the issue of Rafah comes into this because we're at something of a crossroads here, because we can either move forward with the ideas of hope and prosperity, bridge building and rapprochement that the Abraham Accords have brought, and I have to say that the governments of Bahrain, the UAE and Morocco have been far-sighted to maintain that process during the current conflict. But if we don't take that path, we run the risk of going back to 1971 and a generation of radicalised young Arabs who will make a political solution impossible. And we need now to recognise that this debate that we're having today, much of which is, I have to say, quite nuanced on the terms of when and how ceasefires are actually taking place, but we need, as a country, to be setting our sights and our horizons further on what happens when the political process does re-engage. Where does Britain play a role in that? I believe that we have a very positive and constructive role to play, and I think that we now need to take our debate onto that wider and much more important and far-sighted horizon.